The two biggest weaknesses that I did identify was that my GMAT score, even though it might be at a class average, was much lesser than the competitive field I was applying in. And the second one was that I was applying in super early. So I had just completed 2 years of work experience, I think, when I submitted my applications and I was going to start the program at 3. I think the third one is a sort of like a debate question where you have to take a stance or they give you the stance and then you have to like back it up. And I think I fumbled a lot in that. So I would generally say just go in with like an open mind and be as confident as you are, because I think even in an MBA classroom, now that I look back, you have to take a lot of stances that you don't have a lot of information on, which is really sad, but you just have your confidence to carry you through.
Welcome to another episode of Crack the MBA show. Our guest today is Nikita Gupta, who recently completed her first year at Yale School of Management. Nikita was born and raised in Delhi, completed her BA in psychology from Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi University, where she was the class topper. Thereafter, Nikita worked with Invest India, supporting the Startup India program and building bilateral startup engagement with Portugal, France, UK, Australia, helping Indian startups expand to these countries. Nikita is a strong advocate for mental wellness and founded a COVID-19 mental wellness helpline, apart from leading education initiatives at Tulasi Healthcare, a group of mental health establishments. At Yale, Nikita has been involved with the Consulting Club, South Asia Club, RP, and Healthcare Club. Nikita is also an admissions interviewer and student ambassador. This summer, Nikita plans to pursue an internship with BCG in the Washington, D.C. office. Welcome, Nikita. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you, Nupur, for having us. I'm super excited to chat with you.
Likewise. All right, to begin, can you tell our audience a fun fact about yourself?
I think a fun fact is that I used to run this like Grey's Anatomy fan fiction, and that got followed by all these actual celebrities until my parents shut it down because I had to study for my board exams.
That is amazing. That is spectacular. Too bad, yeah. Your parents made you shut it down.
I could have been Instagram popular by now.
Yeah, like an influencer, right? Oh, well, BCG is not so bad either. Okay, amazing. And I want to talk about some influences, right? So, can you share some of your winning habits that have led to all your successes in various areas, right? Like ranking first in college, securing admission to Yale SOM, and succeeding through the competitive MBB consulting recruiting process.
I can talk about two habits that I think have been super helpful throughout these years. One is just being super disciplined. I think always when I'm pursuing a goal, I think it helps to have like timelines and work backwards from that goal and see what it takes to achieve that goal. And of course, work in a structured manner towards it. And second, I think is seeking help. I think as opposed to a lot of popular cultural references, I think I genuinely believe that my success is because of the people around me and how they've been able to like share resources and share mentorship and share knowledge about how I can achieve these goals. So I think both those habits have been crucial throughout my journey at LSR and now at Yale to succeed. And yeah, I think they can be something that other people can draw on as well.
Right. That's amazing. That is so helpful. And even looking back at the work we did together, right? I really remember how you were absolutely relentless. The way you just kept iterating on your essays, iterating on your stories, never giving up for a second, So that makes so much sense. Amazing. And again, I'm just wondering, you shared the habits, which is great. And is there something at the source of those habits in terms of influences? For example, maybe related to your parents, any other figure who really inspired you?
Yeah, I think at this time of both of those habits, definitely my parents are a big influential and people in my life. Both my parents were doctors who became then entrepreneurs. So I think that kind of structured thinking and just being focused to achieve a goal is something I've definitely learned from them. And I think in terms of the latter, just being in a girls' college where you're taught to seek help and be very self-reliant, I think that also influenced me to continuously seek support from around my environment. Both those experiences, I think, have definitely shaped these habits. But a big shout out to my sister as well, I think, who's like always been like a constant support in not only like my ups, but also my downs. Because I think just going back to the second point, I think having that kind of emotional support in your close environment is super helpful to achieve your goals.
Very helpful. Thanks, Nikita. Moving to admissions now, right? Like the part that all prospective applicants are eager to hear about. So I understand you spoke with many MBA admissions consultants, right? Why did you ultimately choose to work with Crack the MBA?
The biggest thing that I discovered in our first conversation is that you're always supportive. And I think the MBA process is super exhausting for anyone because you'll face a lot of rejections, you'll face a lot of like waitlist decisions, which require consistent perseverance from the candidate's part. So I think Nupur was like my biggest advocate, even though all the other admissions consultants were like, maybe you shouldn't apply this year, maybe like do this, maybe do that. I think Nupur was like, no, let's like, if you've decided to apply, I'll do whatever I can to help you achieve your goals. And I think that's really rare. I think I found like an advocate in you for my story and my reasons to go to an MBA program. And I think it became easier that I didn't have to explain it to one more person about why I want to go and why I want to do this. And I think I've always had you on my side. Those were definitely the biggest reasons that I decided to work with you.
Okay, that's super helpful. Thanks for sharing, Nikita. And as an alum of Crack the MBA now, right? Can you share your experience of working with CTM, right? Like maybe the 2 or 3 things that you enjoyed.
I still remember like the biggest experience was that my Stanford deadline was, I think, 2 a.m. India time. And I think we were iterating my essay till like 11:45 p.m. or 12 p.m. And then we were like, okay, we think it's ready. So I think just having that kind of back and forth with support from you where I didn't feel like, oh God, I have to do this alone. I think you were like, okay, this is ready. This essay is ready. Okay, let's work on the next one. That kind of support is very hard to find. And definitely my top experience. I don't think I could have like done that without your support. And I think the second one was when I was also confused whether I should attend Yale this year or not, or like maybe reapply. I think just having you as a sounding board about all these concerns where you were like, what are your goals, whether you can achieve them or not, and being independent of the end outcomes was super helpful.
Very helpful. Thanks for sharing that, Nikita. How long did you spend on each component of your applications, right? Be it tests, essays, networking, and the application form itself.
In terms of the test, I would say I did take the test once, like before I started applying, and then I wanted to retake it. So I would say that was about, let's say, 20 to 30% of the effort that I put in. I do think networking was 20% and definitely influenced my outcomes. I think Yale was a school that I had been able to establish personal relations with the admissions team, and they knew about me and I knew about their process. And because I think Yale also had some components there wasn't enough information about at that time, the video essay and the behavioral test. So I think just seeking more information about them helped me like understand the school better. But I do think apart from this like 40 to 50%, major like 50% of my component was the essays and the application form. I do think that's a major component. And I think people, and even I like had this preconceived notion that it should be one step after the other, but I've realized that they more are like parallel tracks that you have to pursue while you apply. And I do think essays can make or break your story because in a way, now when I look back, I think you can tell how candidate is or how a student is and what their key qualities are from an essay. I think we think of it as just like a way to showcase, oh my God, I'm the best or like I'm an amazing candidate. But I think you can tell a person about how they write about themselves and other things. So I definitely think that was a major component.
Very nice. We will talk in detail about each of these components as well, right? So, what guidance do you have for applicants when it comes to the tests, right? Like GMAT, GRE, prep?
My biggest learning about the GMAT or the GRE is which is a test that I haven't taken from my peers at Yale and from what I've heard is like perseverance. I think most of us at Yale, my peers as well as I, we've taken the test more than 2 times. So I don't think like nailing the test in the first go is something that I think we think of we want to do, but it isn't something that should hold people back. So I would say that once you have a score in hand, you should use that as like a baseline to improve and retake the test. Like, don't be scared to retake the test. I think a lot of us have this preconceived notion that it's the first try or nothing, but it shouldn't be like that. And I think the second one is GMAT Club is amazing resource because there's so many people on that forum willing to help. I don't think I even know half of the people on that forum. Like, I don't know, actually, I probably know one or two on that forum, but there's so many resources, so many guidelines, and everything's like really available. So you should just make an account and access that. And I think my third like tip to any prospective student be that I don't think GRE or GMAT, any of those exams are preferred. So like play to your strengths. Like, if you're really good at like maths, then do the GMAT, or if you're really good at English, do the GRE. But like, yeah, play to your strengths.
That's helpful. And while it's still early days, so I'm not sure if there's a policy that SOM already has out on this or not, but there's also the GMAT focus exam that's coming later this year, right? Do you know if that'll be considered for this cycle, like in round two maybe, or it's not clear yet?
I don't think we have information on that yet, but I'm sure that if candidates are taking that, then you would be more find ways to include that.
Okay, got it. So I think it's probably better for them to check with the admissions
Yeah.
committee later on. Right, that makes sense. And is there a test prep program you recommend for the GMAT?
I honestly don't have one recommendation in mind, but I do think that the official tests and the official books are definitely a thing you should do before your final exam. Yeah, so I don't have like one software or like one website that comes to mind with that.
Okay. And you talked about the essays and how important they are, right, Nikita? So Yale is known for asking applicants about their biggest commitment that they've ever made, which is such an exciting essay. So how did you approach your biggest commitment essay? What was the theme? And if you could talk about your process, that'd be super helpful.
While talking about my biggest commitment, there was a lot of introspection definitely involved. And I wanted to write about something that is true to me and not something that I felt I could relate with, but I haven't shown active commitment to it or value or cause. So I started like looking back towards my life and all the experiences that I've had, either lived or shared with other people. And then I thought that there was common string that tied a lot of those experiences together. And for me, that was creating awareness about mental health. And that was something that I wasn't not only passionate about, but I'd also seen influences of in my real work, in the nonprofit I ran, and things like that. So I definitely thought that there was one common thread that put together a lot of my life experiences. And that's what I chose to write my essay on. For people who are thinking about writing this essay, my biggest advice is just like take a minute to think about what is it that truly you resonate with. I would genuinely want people to be authentic because when I look back at my essays even today, I feel like they are an accurate representation of who I am as a person. It's not like I wrote about something that I don't believe in. And I think that's what really can set a person apart, because sometimes we try to write about values that we think people want to read about, but that may or may not be a true reflection of our own self. And I think that would be a good starting place. Like, what is a value or a cause that you believe in, even if others around you haven't shown that same kind of belief or commitment? And I think based on that, like, I think conversations with other people around you can reaffirm whether they also think that's valid. And I think I remember having a conversation like this with my closest friends and asking them to read my initial essays. And I think asking them if they really think this is a true representation of me.
Right. Those are really helpful tips. And Nikita, what are those 2 or 3 stories that allowed you to shine in your SOM application?
I can't like remember all my essays in depth now, but when I think back, I definitely remember talking about my initial challenges with mental health overall and how that helped me become an advocate. I think just having like an origin of why this became so important to you is super helpful. Like, that was definitely one story that I talked about. And I think the second one is what I've done to like action that value or action that commitment. So I think I talked about running this helpline that was very core to my work during the pandemic, or working with Tulasi, where I also led educational initiatives to educate other mental health professionals. And I think all of those stories drew on the commitment that I had. So I think that's really something that I think, in my opinion, made my applications shine, but I'm not pretty sure.
Yeah, fair. Okay. And Nikita, how can applicants identify those key anecdotes, that truly represent them or that can help them stand apart from the crowd? A lot of times applicants struggle with that. So any advice you have here will be super helpful.
One thing that really helped me is that the conversations we had, because you were like, okay, maybe this does speak to that value, or this does speak to that. So having these conversations, I think, is definitely one way that you can, in my opinion, understand from a third person perspective if this is truly a way that you've honored that commitment, or truly a way that you've lived up to what you're saying have. And I think sometimes we as person experiencer tend to put a lot of value in certain stories and certain instances, but it might not seem so from a third person perspective. So having those conversations is super helpful. I think secondly, I would say that to draw on those anecdotes, maybe note down everything that you feel is relevant in your working life, and have an extensive list of events, and then use that as a base to identify, okay, is this because of something deeper, or is this surface level? And just having that entirety of your experience written down by keywords, I think it's helpful to draw on while you write essays, and even if while you're in.
Fair, really helpful. And Nikita, Yale has another essay where the question is about how candidates arrived at their career interests and how they intend to pursue them. So, could you talk a little bit about what advice you have for that goals essay and how you personally pursued it as well?
I think my biggest advice here would be just talking to people. I think talk to people who have similar goals as you, who are maybe already in the program, or who are alums of the program. So they've graduated in the last 2 or 4 years, and they know hey, if you do have this goal coming in, how can you meet it? And what are active steps you can take to meeting it? So I remember that when I was applying, I do see my 5 to 7 year goal being mental health entrepreneurship. And I spoke to this alum, Daisy Rosales, who's running this mental health care startup. So she helped me understand how can I go back? How can I retrace on some of her steps and draw on those learnings and maybe achieve that career goal in the next 5 to 7 years? So we have so many, we have a diverse student body. So I would say speak to people who've either been where you are or are heading where you want to be. It could be consulting, IB, or it could be something really niche, social impact. I have some classmates going to work for really companies, and I honestly feel whatever you want to do, I'm sure someone at Yale SOM is kind of doing it or something similar. So maybe talk to them.
Okay, really helpful. And do you recommend that applicants talk about why Yale in that essay?
I think that would be a good place to showcase why the program is so important to you, but I don't think over-indexing on that would be relevant, because I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to voice that in your interviews as well and explain why you're interested in Yale. But I do think that should not overshadow what the real essay question is, which is about your career and how you plan to achieve it. I'm sure Yale has programs or clubs that will help you work towards those goals, but I don't think you should only talk about that. I think you should tackle the meat of the essay question.
Yeah, it's really important to answer the actual question. You're absolutely right. And Nikita, what weaknesses in your application or candidacy, or we should say perceived weaknesses, did you successfully overcome, and how?
The two biggest weaknesses that I did identify was that my GMAT score, even though it might be at a class average, was much lesser than the competitive pool I was applying in. And I think Indians do have one of the highest GMAT scores in any of these programs. So I think just being from that pool, being from India, I think that was definitely a perceived weakness that I thought of. And the second one was that I was applying in super early. So I had just completed 2 years of work experience, I think, when I submitted my applications and I was going to start the program at 3. So I think that was also, those were two perceived weaknesses. And I think now with time at Yale, I don't see one as a weakness at all, because I think once you're in a program, you realize that GMAT's only the key to getting in and not why you could be successful at the program or not. But I think about 2, I do feel like people who have a little bit more experience have richer inputs to share in class. That having said, I don't want to discourage anyone from applying. I do think I definitely know of peers as well at Yale who have similar amount of work experience, and all of us definitely enjoy our classroom and classroom interaction. But yeah, that's how I look back at them now.
Okay, great. And speaking about these so-called perceived weaknesses, right? Is there something you did in as part of your application to mitigate for the adverse impact of these?
I think in terms of my GMAT, I also came, like I had a good to great CGPA as opposed to other candidates. So I think I could show academic rigor from that. In terms of 2, I do remember using the additional essay to just explain why am I applying early and what does that mean for my career and what does that mean for my classmates. Because just for the admission committee to understand why I wanted to attend campus year and not be yours.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you. And Nikita, can you share your Yale SOM interview experience?
What I remember, I think you have to submit like a small essay before the interview on a prompt. I'm not sure, but I think is that still the thing with Yale?
Right. There's the video essays. So maybe you can speak about those as well a little bit.
I think for my Yale interview, there was a question that we had to submit like 150 or 200 words.
There's also a quotation, right?
Yeah, like a quotation. That's what I meant. That you have to write on. And I think the interview definitely asks you a bit about that. So I would say like whatever you write, there has to be something you truly believe in, because I think in like a video conversation or an in-person conversation, it's very quick to tell if you're like making something up and you're not. And I think the second thing was that do present authentic stories like in that star format, because I do remember in my Yale interview as well as some other interviews, there was a lot of cross questioning. So if it's not a truly lived experience, then there are loopholes in your story which are just impossible to clarify or make up at the spot. So that's definitely an advice. And I think the third one would be that have like your stories mapped. And I remember like you give me like a question bank of all the questions that can possibly be asked in the interview. So I'd like map some instances. I wouldn't recommend both memorizing your responses because it seems very inauthentic. And I think as an admission interviewer, you can tell a little bit that those are some things that you memorize and come in. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think your Yale interviewer is the second year. And as an admission interviewer myself, I just really want to know you. I don't like care if you have all the tick box answers. I want to see if I can have a conversation with you at Yale and learn something about you and like just an exchange that's us.
Okay, fair. And there's also the video essays, right, Nikita? So can you share your advice for how candidates can excel? And some of the video essays are pretty tricky as well, if I remember.
Honestly, I think I mentioned to you, I won't get it after my video essays because they were just so funny. And I hope like nobody ever gets their hands on my video responses, because I think they're really the harder bit, because you're speaking to yourself and you have like 60 seconds to frame your thoughts and then just go. I think 2 of those video interview like questions are about yourself. So those are the ones that I'm sure you like practice beforehand. I think I got like, why do you want to do an MBA? And the second one was talking about like a weakness that I had. So I think for those, I was more or less, I knew what I could talk about. So it was more about structuring my thoughts in the given amount of time. I think the third one is a sort of like a debate question where you have to take a stance, or they give you the stance and then you have to like back it up. And I think I fumbled a lot in that. So I would generally say just go in with like an open mind and be as confident as you are, because I think even in an MBA classroom, now that I look back, you have to take a lot of stances that you don't have a lot of information on, which is really sad, but you just have your confidence to carry you through. So I think that's what like they're trying to see, will you be a confident like public speaker? Or will you be confident enough to like raise your hand in class and share a perspective your peers may not be with? And I think you can not have all the facts and still record an okay video interview. I don't know how it's weighed in the entire application process. I would retrospectively think not a lot because mine were really bad. And yeah, I think they're not the hard. I wouldn't stress a lot about them. I think the behavioral interview or the behavioral questionnaire that you have to fill out is also something that you do in your Yale application, which is also like just don't overthink it. Just be like your true self. I think I got like one question 5 times and I was like, they just kept changing the words. And I know like a lot of my peers had similar experiences.
Right. What's the purpose of the behavioral assessment? How long does it take? A little bit of info about that.
I don't remember the exact time, but I think around 20-ish minutes. I do remember I just got COVID and I recovered and I took the test. So I was also, I think, not my best version. But regardless, I mean, looking back, I don't think as much as we stress and over-index on these things is as important as they are. In terms of like the behavioral question, I actually think that they're used in a way to form out cohorts at Yale because I feel like a lot of cohorts in the Yale core curriculum, like a lot of people have like similar personality characteristics, but this is not the official, this is an insider news or an insider conspiracy that most students have. I actually don't, and I can't comment to how relevant or how is it used, but I think it's like a fun bit of the application because you're doing something different. So
awesome. Thank you, Nikita. And Nikita, what is the evaluation rubric followed by the admissions committee? What are some traits that they're evaluating?
I think this is, of course, a close approximation. I don't have actual information on what they use, but I definitely think one thing that's super important for everyone at Yale is the and society piece. I know that our mission statement is business and society, and I think everybody is your like application, your interviewer, and I think like overall the process is trying to evaluate if you embody that mission state or not. It could be in the smallest of ways, or it could be where you're just trying to make your work ways more inclusive, or it could be in defining ways where you're launching initiatives to do that. But I genuinely believe they're trying to understand this a little better. And when I look at my peers at Yale now, I do believe everyone embodies that. Like that's something some people want to make a social impact now, but then I know some people who's like 5 year or 7 year or 10 year goal is to start a nonprofit, or their 10 year goal is to change something that bothers them. And I think that and society piece is super relevant because unlike a lot of business schools, a lot of our classes focus on that. And we talk a lot about that. Yeah, I think it was a value that was important to me as well. What can I do to change mental health? I'm constantly having those and society discussions. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you can't do consulting post MBA. I think you can, but even while you're doing that, I think most of my peers are thinking about what can we do that, and that's really exciting.
Okay, super cool. And Nikita, since you are a student ambassador, can you share 2 or 3 examples of great questions you've been asked by prospective applicants?
A really interesting question that made me think. Almost all questions that make me think are my favorite ones because it gives me perspective and an opportunity to think. I think one interesting one was, what do you think makes like a Yale SOM a Yale overall? And what are you thinking about in that overarching scheme of like the Yale University? I think the second one was that I found really interesting is how I have been able to see my peers or myself just represent the and society mission that I was talking about, which is so important, and how we see that either in our interactions or influence our classroom learning. And I think the third one, if pizza in New Haven is that great, I know like New Haven, where Yale is supposed to be like the pizza capital of the US or something. And there's like this debate on these pizza places, but my hot take is that it is overhyped. And I've had like good pizza in Delhi as well. I think when people ask me like, hey, do you like the pizza there? I think my response is always like, I think there are great pizza places around the world. But yeah, that's my hot take.
Okay, that's super helpful. And I really enjoyed the first question that you just talked about, right? Would love to get your answer to that on the show.
I think how a Yale SOM is also a Yale is in the way that the entire program is structured. I, of course, don't know of other MBA programs, but I know that at SOM, I take classes with other Yale undergrads, and I genuinely believe they're the smartest people. And they'll come into our class with so much enthusiasm and with so much ideas. And they have like the interactions that I have with them, or like students from Yale Law School or Yale Public Health School. I think those have definitely been like one of the best part about my like experience at Yale, but also like just being in New Haven, which is a college town. So it's not like super huge that you can't go to the other campuses. But I like to just go and eat like at an undergrad dining hall from time to time. Or I think like experience the entire Yale undergrad life, which is a lot different from the MBA life. But you can go and like see these undergrad dining halls. And as someone from India, I had no experience to that prior to SOM. So it's really amazing. And I think the last one is like overall, there's this sense of Yale pride during the Harvard Yale weekend, just like this historic that happens between Harvard and Yale. And everyone's like dressed in Yale gear and like enjoying. And I think it's really an embodiment of how you're a part of the larger Yale University. So I think that's definitely a big part of it.
Okay, super helpful. And that makes me even more excited to visit in a couple of weeks.
That's exciting.
Yeah, super. All right. So shifting gears to the SOM questions now, Nikita. What for you is SOM's unique identity? I know you talked about the business and society piece as one. Maybe there's a couple other things.
Something that I think is really unique here. And definitely one is my peers, but also my friends. Like everyone I speak to, they're so inspirational, right? They're people who want to like, make funding in South Africa in small startup success. And then there are people who want to change how people do business in small states of the world. And all of that is so inspirational. So I think my peers, like every time I speak to them, I think I learn something new. And as soon as I think of Yale, I think of this enormous amount of it that I've had in this one year. I think the second thing that I definitely think of when I think of Yale is just New Haven. I think the fact that it's a small city means it's not even a city, it's a college town, means that like you can experience so much of like the MBA while making really deep connections. And I talk to like all prospective students about this community element. All my friends live within the same 2 mile radius, and you can walk to all of their houses. Like it's so uncommon to do that in any other major US city. And like you have this like sense of community. Like my roommate and I like host people over for Indian food because we want to share our culture with them. And that there's this Vatican dinner at Yale SOM. It's a tradition where these 3 people who just graduated from SOM, they would host like a dinner every Wednesday. And it's free of cost. It's not like you have to pay to go eat dinner there, but you have to just bring wine and speak to people and just meet new people. And I think so much of this community element has shaped my experience at Yale. Yeah, it's just unpacked.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. So you talk. There's a Vatican dinner, so that happens like an ongoing basis, or is it a one-time thing?
It's an ongoing basis, and they like the 3 Vatican popes. It's basically in a church converted house, hence the name Vatican.
That's cool.
Yeah, they have like dinners every like Wednesday, and you sign up in a Google Sheet, and you basically eat like a meal that's home cooked with like 8 to 10 people off like SOM. You probably wouldn't have had conversations with, right? So it's a great way to meet new people. And my roommate and I, we have people over for Indian food. My neighbors who are now graduating used to host biryani nights, and they would make chicken biryani and have like a lot of people over. So I think the community element at Yale is unparalleled. We definitely have like school organized events, but I think that's very common at most schools. But I think it's amazing to see like students step in and like create events or create things that are like there's so much community building. I remember like my first semester, there's this classmate of mine, actually in class of 2023, and he's like a tequila expert, and he hosts like tequila tasting at his house. And I think he's like had more than 200 varieties there.
Whoa.
And it's not like something that the school is doing. I think it's just like students wanting to share these things that they think are important into them with their peers, and we have like a run club where people run. Not that I take part of it because it's really cold in New Haven, but like they run Wednesday mornings at 7 a.m. and I'm always so impressed. There's just like so much community things happening at Yale that even though we're a small school, I think you genuinely have the opportunity to make deeper connections.
Yeah, sounds like it. That's really exciting. And what are the other flagship events, right? Like you talked about the Vatican dinners. So, what are some of the most popular flagship events through the year?
I think the Vatican dinner isn't even a school thing, but like in terms of like school things, we have this internship fun night where we all dress up, go and try to raise money for our peers who are going into non-profit and probably don't have, if they're not being paid like a certain amount, the internship fund will cover for their summer stipend to be at least a certain amount. And that amount varies from year to year. But I think that's super exciting that we've been able to do that. And at that internship fund, you can bid for like experiences. So like you bid, I think like cool things this year were like you bid like for your friends to take like digital portraits of you, or you bid like a cabin where you can go, and it's a technology free cabin. So you can go hike there with like 10 of your friends and live there for a weekend. So I think that's definitely one night that I had like a lot of fun, internship fun, because it's such a unique experience, like you're bidding on experiences together. The other one was, now that I'm thinking back, it was Diwali. I think it was my first Diwali away from home, and I was like a little skeptical on whether like it would be great, but it was definitely a huge event. We had like a talent show, so we all choreographed dances. I choreographed a dance and like had a lot of my friends from other nationalities join in. And it was amazing teaching them like Bollywood dance moves. And then we like all danced on the stage and everyone was cheering us on. And then we had like Indian food. And I think it was amazing because I think you really miss home at these big festivals. And I think the third one, there are definitely a lot, but the third one for me has been like just the travel overall with my classmates. So we did like a class trip in fall to Vermont, which is like a 2 hour drive, and we saw like the fall foliage and everything. But I think it was an opportunity to like travel with my classmates and get to know them. And then I've had the opportunity to do a lot more of that. I think, yeah, I went to Costa Rica with like 10 people who I go to Yale SOM, but I didn't know that well. And I think all of them are like my favorite now. They're amazing.
Fun, amazing times. Okay, and you talked about New Haven as well, right, Nikita? So, what does it feel like to live in New Haven? You mentioned that everything's in like a 2 mile radius. Maybe are there a lot of eating joints, restaurants, bars? How do people engage with the city of New Haven?
New Haven, I mean, it's unfair to draw comparisons to cities like Delhi or New York because it's just much smaller in scale. But I think for the scale it is, you have like so many eating restaurants. I think we have like 4 or 5 Indian restaurants. We have food trucks which are amazing. There's like never a dull choice because you have so much that you can like probably go try. I don't think I've tried all the restaurants till now, but there's just like so much happening at Yale. In terms of the eating scene, it's great. I don't think anyone should worry about it. And the best part is like if you don't have what you want in New Haven, it's like a 2 hour direct train, right? So you can always go to New York and like go to whatever spot that you're really attracted. I think the second thing about like the city overall, I think yes, it's super commutable. We have like a Yale shuttle, which is like a Yale bus that runs throughout the city that's free to use. So it's really easy for you to commute in the day, at night, like when it's cold. I think it's super easy. Third, I think overall, we also have like a lot of cross Yale events, which are nice. Like we have places that have host events. We have like a Yale grad bar, which like has like a dance party every Saturday or something, and all grad students come in. So I think all those places which are very common and super close to everyone allow for you to meet them outside of Yale SOM as well.
Right, right. And do most students live close to each other? Like, are there specific apartments which are extremely popular?
So a lot of us don't live in grad housing. We have like apartments close by to SOM. But yeah, I think everyone lives either in East Rock or downtown, and both of those areas I think are like 2 miles apart. They're like 3 stops by the Yale shuttle, so it's very easy to commute between these 2 spots. I do think there are certain areas or certain buildings near Yale where more students live than not, but I don't think there's like one particular building where all of them are housed together. And I think like because the city is super walkable, It's really easy to like go from one spot.
And what has it been like for you as an international student in the US? This was your first time studying in the US, right? Did you find it hard to immerse?
I would generally say that New Haven's made it much easier because my classmates are so much more accessible, and because New York is also huge. So if I have to like travel or fly back, it's not that I have hours, 4 hours to get wherever. And I think as an international, it's the South Asian community at Yale is so strong. I live in a housing building where there's so many South Asians that we all like meet in the evening for chai. I don't think I've even done that with my friends in India where everyone's like coming over at 5 p.m. to have chai and parleji. And like I think all of these experiences have like made my experience really amazing. But I, having said that, I don't think, I mean, there are definitely days where I miss home and my family in India. But I think just like having a strong South Asian community at Yale makes it easier for me to like deal with being homesick. I think the second one is definitely that made my experience as an international really unique is that there are so many international students at Yale. And once you move there, you realize wherever you're from, if you're an international student, you have so much to relate to each other about. So in my small learning team, there's this person from more Southeast Asia or South Asia. And I realized that we become best of friends because we just have so much shared experience. And I think it's through community interactions like that you realize that there's just so much similarity and so much that you can learn.
Right. What's the biggest challenge you've faced at SOM thus far, Nikita?
One challenge that I faced at Yale initially was just adapting to the culture. It's definitely a lot different from India. It's just like subtle cultural things where you have to like, let's say you don't share food in America. I think in India, everyone just like eats off each other's plates. It's just like very small, subtle cultural things like that require adapting, right? You have to do all your household chores, or how do you like cope with that and balance everything else out? I think all of those small cultural things also influence your interpersonal communication. I think in India, it's like a lot more informal within friends, and that formal communication is I only remember doing that at the workplace. But I think a lot of like networking events or other things, there's like different cultural interpersonal communication. But I think with time you get used to it. So I don't think it's been like a hard challenge. It's still I struggle with. I think with time more used to it.
And what is one resource or opportunity you wished you knew about as an applicant to SOM?
I think one source that applicants maybe don't know about as much is definitely the City Entrepreneurship Center that we have. It's like this big entrepreneurship center for students across Yale, and they give you chance to work on your projects and like collaborate. The second one is definitely, it's not a resource, but like an experience, like just the Schwarzman Center dining hall that we have. I think it's like Oxford style dining hall where you can like go grab them, and it's really good. So I think both of those things are like things that I underplayed coming into Yale, and I didn't know how like they've both been like really helpful in one, my career goal, and secondly, of course, shared experiences.
Okay. Have you been engaging with the Sai Center, and like in what way have you found it useful?
So I have off late started engaging with them, and I think as I'm thinking of working on an idea that I had in one of my entrepreneurship classes, I think they give you like a student discovery fund, so you can use that like initial grant of certain amount to just like work on that idea. It doesn't even have to be a prototype. Like you can just use that money to research and set up meetings and do like a test whether this idea would pan out. So I think that's super helpful.
Understood. And switching gears to academics, Nikita, can you share the academic highlights for you during your MBA journey at SOM thus far?
Academically, SOM has a core, which is like certain classes that most students take, and they like compromise of a lot of business basics, HR, finance, entrepreneurship, things like that. And then towards like the end of your first year, you can start adding in electives, which are some things that you may like in your interest areas. A lot of my friends added electives from other schools as well. So that's a possibility too. I think that's flexibility in the curriculum towards like your end of second, like your second semester at Yale is really helpful because you can then start doing classes in other schools and other professors. You can also take up interdisciplinary classes, which is what I've done so far. I took a class on public health entrepreneurship, which had like students from MPH, MD, and then MBA. And it was an amazing class. It's one of my favorite classes thus far. We talk about public health cases and how does entrepreneurship help solve like public health problems. But I think my biggest learning curve has also been through some of these core classes, because I was coming in as a liberal arts student who hadn't done like accounting or finance before. And surprisingly, I quite enjoy finance classes, even though I don't have like a quant bend of mine. And I was in an engineer, which was like the core enabled me to learn that. I don't think I would have otherwise discovered that I like finance classes. I also took this core class called State and Society, which is amazing. It's my favorite core class. And I'm sure like every incoming Yale student will love that class.
And what do you like so much about that class, State and Society?
So it's this class that kind of talks about how society impacts business, and we don't think enough about it in things like gender, right? I think we don't talk enough about how do gender roles influence what kind of roles like we take up in the corporate world and what kind of pay we accept. And I think I didn't even realize, but like I learned from that class that till now there's like a wage gap difference, and that definitely does happen post MBA, because women try to take up roles that have like more flexible working hours and things like that. And just I think knowing about those things that you talk about, but you don't know how relevant it is to you, or is something you may feel deeply about, but then you've never seen data to back it up. So I think all of those things happen in that class where I learned so many new things, but then I saw data that backs this up, where there is like gender wage gap after an MBA. And it was just super exciting to learn about that in class, but then think about that outside class and how that impacts me and what do I want to do about that. I genuinely think a class that can make you think to that extent beyond the classroom is super impactful.
Okay. And Nikita, who are the star professors and what are the most popular electives?
I don't know if there are like certain electives that stand out. It definitely depends on your interest area. Since mine was healthcare, I think most of the electives I've taken have been just in healthcare so far, and some in entrepreneurship. But like I have to say, some core professors that stood out to me have been the professors that taught state and society and then macro econ. We have this professor, I don't remember his full name, but his first name's Lorenzo, who teaches macro. And I have never been interested in macro as much as I pay attention to that class. I'm just like, yes. He's like such an engaging professor. He's so fun. Also, like our ops engine professor, he was teaching us operations and he would bring chocolate to class. I think that just made me like love that class through conditioning. I was like, yes, I like leave this class with candy in my hand.
Helps you stay up as well.
Yeah, and I'm just like, and even though we're just like talking about the supply chain and the operations of making chocolate, and that's why we had chocolate in class, but it still like made me like super interested in learning about it. And I think I said public health entrepreneurship, Professor Teresa, she's been amazing. She'll bring in all these guest speakers who are running their healthcare startups and are changing something. And that's just been amazing. Yeah, so those are definitely a few of my favorite professors.
Okay. And would you like to talk a little bit about the raw case approach, Nikita? That's something very, very interesting and impressive about SOM.
The raw cases are basically where you have a lot of information. And unlike the HPS cases, which are more synthesized and you already know what aspect of business they're focusing on, raw cases just like information as you would have, let's say, in the real world. And you have to sort out and make sense of all of that information. So I think the most pertinent example of this was when I was doing this finance class, which is about sourcing and managing funds. We had to create like valuation models for Beyond Me as a startup before they went public and listed. So I think just having all that information, you see finance also from so many different lenses. Like what is the competitive landscape? What does the founder believe about that startup? When you have so much information, you kind of not only understand what to prioritize and to meet a certain goal, but you also, I think, develop an interdisciplinary lens to look at a problem. And I definitely think that's really important regardless of what you do post MBA. Just looking at a business problem, even in consulting from different lenses helps. And doing that in a small startup helps. Because I think, unlike what we see in business school, a lot of these functions aren't as disjointed as we want to believe. Just HR and even like finance is so interrelated. How do you allocate budget to hiring human capital? How many people do you want to hire? So a lot of those things are really interlinked, and I think raw cases help understand that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did it also help you through your recruiting process?
More than it helping my recruiting process, it was a way of realizing that, like, of the information that you have, there's always like something beyond the scope that could also influence the way I'm looking at a problem. I think like the raw cases are a good way to realize that you might have a lot of information and you have to succinctly put it together and then look at what is the first and the easiest way to target a problem, and then what are ancillary ways. And I think that's how you often look at consulting business problems as well. And I think developing that interdisciplinary mindset has been helpful during recruiting.
Okay, fair. And Nikita, you talked about taking courses with other Yale schools, right? Yale's amazing in that there are 14 graduate and professional schools. So you can take all these other courses. Are there any restrictions to the number of courses you can take through your 2 years at other schools at Yale University?
I don't think so. Like, I don't know of any restrictions. And honestly, it's about if like it's you're not able to balance it. That's the only limitation. But I think, yeah, like a lot of my peers have taken courses that I would not even have thought you could do in an MBA, like courses on gender, courses on spirituality. A few of my classmates are doing courses with the divinity school, which is so rare to think of because you usually think of business as an intersection with other elements, but maybe not divinity. And then like a lot of my classmates are definitely doing courses like at the Yale Law School or the Public Health School. And it's just helpful that a lot of people coming into SOM are dual degree students. So you get to know of these courses. We have someone in our class who's like a dual degree with Yale School of Drama. They like are recommend courses that we should do to help improve like our communication skills and like maybe learn how to enunciate better or learn how to like, speak better and present better. Yeah, so I don't think there's a limitation on the number of courses you can take. Of course, there are courses that you can't take because you don't need them. Like you can't come in and be like, I want to take a surgery course because that would be fatal. But I think you can take any course that you are qualified to take.
Okay, that's helpful. And are there some courses or schools that are more popular for SOMers to want to take courses in?
I think Yale Law is really popular for like competitive antitrust and competitive strategy course because that's definitely a core part of business. But then there are like Jackson, which is the public policy school courses, which are also important. I honestly think it depends on your interest area. Like, I'm planning to take a mental health policy course, which I don't think is very popular at SOM, but it depends on your interest area. A lot of SOMers do take like a language course because you could do that at Yale and you learn like a new language. And I don't even think of that as like you don't actually correlate that with like business school education, but like people learn a new language and you can do that and there's so many options. Yeah, I'm hoping that I can get back to learning French a little bit.
Ah, super. That should be exciting. And Nikita, one really important thing we also want to talk about is recruiting. So, with the recent success you've had recruiting for an MBB company, BCG, I think our audience could really learn a lot from your experiences. So, to begin, can you share how consulting recruiting works at SOM?
Like most schools, you have professionals from these consulting companies come to campus and you have an opportunity to meet them, understand your firm fit, as well as what you can learn from the firm and vice versa. Like, what do you have to offer to the firm? And these conversations are super helpful to understand that. I think for an international student, these like coffee chats are also helpful to figure out what geographical location or office location you want to apply for. Because in the US, you have to pick a location and then apply for that. and not the entire country. I think that's a differentiation with the process in India for MBB. I think then you just do casing and a lot of case practices, which is mostly business cases that they'll ask you in your interviews. And there's a lot of support throughout from the consulting club. I genuinely think I got my offer because of like my second year case team leader, Emma. Like she was really invested in me like doing well with my interviews. So much so like during winter break when she was about to travel, she still took time to like practice cases with me or practice my answers with me. And I think that kind of commitment is honestly, I haven't ever seen that anywhere else, where someone else is so invested in you doing well.
Okay, that's amazing. That's inspiring. And in terms of the timeline, so when do you do the coffee chats or the networking, so to speak? When does that start?
That started like a month after Yale began. So I think like started school in August, and by September, October, we already had like coffee chats. And these timelines, I think, do sometimes vary for different people, but the consulting club also has sample timeline of when events happen. So you always have like a cross reference of where you should be in the process with that timeline.
Okay, understood. And how many Indian students did you have in your class? And, if you could help us better understand roughly how many would have gone for consulting and then what other roles people have gone for.
We're about like 10% of Indian origin Indians, not counting for Indians who hold like the US citizenship or some other citizenship. And all of us, I think, we're pretty split between different roles. I don't think we have like a major consulting is definitely a major internship, MBB being one of the major internship providers.
So how many people would have secured MBB internship? So like total Indians would be how many? The Indian origins, 10% would be how many?
I would say like 30 to 32 would be like all the Indian origin students at Yale SOM. I don't know the exact number of people who are going to MBA, but I do think of those 30, around 10 to 12 are going to consulting firms. So MBA, other strat consulting firms, or like
what would be the other ones which people would be going to?
Carney, YP. I know some people are going to internal consulting roles like at Fidelity, or just like other like consulting roles. Let's say if you're interested in pharma, then they're doing like corp strategy at Bayer, or they're doing corp strategy at big like companies like that. So they're like all consulting based roles where you're doing strategy consulting, but it might not get them. So I think it depends on what you want. So depending on that, you can like pick the kind of role that you want. If you already have an industry in mind, then you can do a corporate strategy role, because then you get a lot of exposure to that industry. In terms of like the other, I know a few are going to tech. One of my really good Indian friends is like a PM intern at Microsoft. So those are definitely kind of roles that you can explore. And then investment banking, I know like about 4 to 5 Indians are going into investment banking roles. So like
what firms for the investment banking?
Barclays, JP Morgan. I don't know firms for everyone, but like those are like the kind of firms that they're going into.
Okay, fair. And for the tech offers, how many Indians do you think would be going into tech roles? It doesn't have to be PM, it could also be other tech roles.
I don't know like an exact number, but I think between 5 to 8 would be going
Oh,
into.
okay. That's a lot, especially given the market dynamics that we've been hearing about.
Yeah, like I think some Indians are also, they're definitely going into big tech and doing PM roles there, but there are some Indians who are interested in like doing marketing at smaller firms, or doing product management, or like a co-founder role in like a startup. So those are also opportunities that Indians who are interested overall in the tech sector want to explore. I think some of my classmates who are Indians are like doing really amazing roles. Like one of our classmates is going into like fashion consulting, which is not something that you think of commonly. Like she's from NIF, so that's what she'll be consulting on, like sustainable fashion projects.
At like a consulting firm?
It's a boutique consulting firm.
Oh, okay. Would you know the name?
I don't remember the name, but the firm was also started by Yale alum. So she's going to be doing like sustainable fashion work. So if you know like what space you want to work in, you can look for roles in a more structured manner. Like she was very set on doing fashion work from the get.
Right, right. But those kind of opportunities, right? Like, for example, fashion consulting or the non traditional opportunities, like you also talked about, let's say, marketing role at a small startup. So, can such roles result in a full time opportunity as well?
I think they can. There's no hard and fast rule that they can't. I think a lot of like people go back and work full time with these companies. And the best part about an internship is I think it's an opportunity to actually figure out if that is for you or not. We often like recruit for industries where full time offers are secure, but you can also like recruit for an industry you're passionate about and then come back and recruit full time, IB, tech, or consult. So I think it's a good days to like launch yourself in an industry that you haven't worked in. A lot of my classmates are going to work for in climate or sustainability, even though they have no experience there. And even if they don't get full-time roles, I think they can come back and always re-recruit. But at least for a summer, it's a good way to test out the waters and see if that industry is.
Okay, what kind of roles are available in climate and sustainability?
I know some people are going in like sustainability roles at like companies. I know one of my friends is going into like a sustainability role at Under Armour. And I would imagine that to be really and the kind of work she does. Then I know some people who are doing climate VCs that invest in climate tech. So like big companies like Actors or P funds that write checks, climate focused companies. But I also know people working in other climate startups that have been started by Yale alums or like by other Yale undergrad alums as well. And they're going to work there as chief of staff or some other founder's office role where they can just get exposure to the.
Understood. Very cool. Can international students hope to transition to investing straight after the MBA? Or do you think it makes more sense to first get a pivot, like through consulting or through iBanking even?
I won't say it's easy. I would say it's definitely one of the difficult pivots to make because we see even for American students is super like sought after. So those roles in itself are limited. But I don't think it's impossible. A lot of my peers are pivoting into VC or the PE space without any prior experience. So, and a lot of VC and PE firms are also now offering like an in-semester internship that may not be paid, but you can use that to build out your skills, right? So if that's something of your interest, you can join Yale and then start interning part-time with a VC firm to build out that skill set. That could be a VC based in India also. But at least you have like this skill set, like you know how to make like financial models or building. And once you have that, I think it helps you also get like a way in. In New Haven, we have like a lot of student run funds as well. So they're a good place to build that skill set. We have some Yale SOM funds, but we also have like broader Yale funds that are run so that you can take positions in those funds and practice these skills. So I think I would say that you, of course, need to show some history or some past experience in the industry. And if you're able to do that, you can enter a VCP role as well. It's not impossible. But I would say just like maybe use your time at Yale or before even like coming to SOM to build out some of those skills.
Okay, fair. Nikita, can you speak about the resources that you found most useful through your job search process?
Definitely, because I was going a much more structured route. So I wouldn't be able to comment on some of the other searches and how that looked like. But for me, I think it was pretty straightforward because MBBs and all of these firms come to campus and they'll have like a presentation of sorts to talk about the work you can do with them. And I think those like that BCG presentation was a helpful resource for me to establish like an initial connect with the firm and understand that, hey, this is like a firm I could see myself at. And I think that's definitely a really helpful resource. Like everyone who came from BCG on campus, like I've had the best interactions with them. I've had like an amazing opportunity to get to know them and about the firm. So it's not like I'm just applying because it's a prestigious MBB firm, but it helped me really understand why do I see myself at BCG and what kind of work do I want to do? So I think one was definitely the company resources. Secondly, I think second years who've already interned in those firms, in those cities. I think, like I was telling you, my case team leader was amazing. She also worked at BCG the summer before, so she could.
What do you mean by a case team leader? If you could also explain that for our audience.
Sure. So when you come to Yale and you are pretty interested in doing consulting as a structured part or tech as well, then there's like a second team case team leader who's allocated to you in a group of like 5 to 6 first years who are doing the same.
And this is by the career dev office.
No, it's actually by the club. So like,
Oh, okay.
I think for consulting and tech, the clubs are amazing, right? And they're student led. So the club allocated a team of 5 people, and I'm really close to all of those 5 people who did like consulting recruiting with me. And the idea is that you have like peer support to help you through the recruitment process. But then a second year person who's in turn at like one of the 6 firms comes down and like helps you. They'll help you practice. They'll help you practice for like your business cases, networking, for your mock cases with the firm and with your for your interviews. And I think they are like a go-to resource for anything. So I think I developed a close relationship with my case team leader who was a second year who also went to BCG. So I was able to like learn about the firm from an insider perspective as well as a student and the kind of opportunities you have there.
Okay, really helpful. And what about the career development office, right? How's that structured and what role do they play in your recruiting process?
I would say the career development office is definitely much more important if you're doing a non-traditional recruiting. Whereas for MBB, because there's just like so much interaction between the student club as well as the firms directly, the role of the CDO isn't as important or isn't as pronounced. I think pronounced is the right word because they definitely play an important role in maintaining those relationships with the firm so that the firms come on campus, the firm representatives are there on campus. We have like an active relationship with all these MBB firms so that they know that we're interested in recruiting. They also share timely information with us through that channel. But I definitely, more than the CDO, I think a huge shout out to the consulting club at Yale because they're like students who are literally like mentoring first years who are coming in and they take time out of their days to do that. And yeah, they just like run a curriculum which meets like every Wednesday after class and they teach you like things, how do you handle cases, networking, everything. Like it's almost like a additional core class that you're taking because you have to go to all these meetings and then you have like a case team meeting. So it's definitely, I would say, a much more student-led effort in terms of consulting. I'm not in the consulting club leadership, so I don't know what is their interaction with the CDO and the firm. So I don't think I can comment on that.
Okay, fair. And Nikita, do test scores matter for consulting, recruitment? Do prospective employers ask for your test scores?
I think some firms ask for them, but they're definitely not like a make or break. Most consulting firms honestly care about like your interactions with the firm in terms of networking and your eventual interviews. Like you can get maybe an interview basis your interactions and your scores. Maybe they play a role there, but then you bomb your interviews, I don't think you can get your internship. So I honestly don't think that people with the highest GMAT scores get invited to interview or anything like that. Generally, I think it's the rapport that you build with these firms when they're on campus. And yeah, just like how authentic are you? How do you actually want to do consulting or do you see that as like a stepping stone? Like things like that, which I think these firm reps can assess in your interaction.
Okay, got it. So if somebody has a lower score, they don't necessarily have to retake it just for their consulting recruiting.
I really don't think so. I would like rather have them focus their efforts on beating the firm and building a stronger network within the
Okay, gotcha. How many touch points per firm do people generally have?
up to 3 or up to 4. People definitely have more, people have less. But I think it's important to not speak to people for the heck of speaking to people or for just like establishing another touch point. I think it's really important to actually have real conversations and again, like be your authentic self and to know about the and go in with an open mind. So I think I would rather retrospectively also speak to one person 5 times than speak to 5 different people so that one person knows me really well versus 5 people knowing me a little bit.
Okay. And how many cases did you practice before your interviews?
I honestly think there's no right or wrong number of cases. Some people reach and are ready within 25 cases. I think I did a lot more. I would have done between 40 to 50 cases, but that's also a function of how I saw myself evolve as a caser. I think towards the end of like my casing practice, I felt most comfortable. And that was kind of like a few days before my interview. So I stopped casing. I think it's a little bit about developing confidence in that muscle memory of how do you approach cases. I don't think, again, having said that, there's no like right number of cases you must do before your interviews. I think some people I know like did 10 cases and have an MBB internship. And I know some people who did like a lot, many more cases. I just feel like you should know yourself because you don't want to get burnt out or go underprepared. You just want to hit that sweet spot where you're confident, but it doesn't seem like you've memorized anything.
Okay, understood. Is there anything aspiring consultants can do to better prepare themselves for consulting recruiting?
It's going to be really stressful once you get to school. So just have all the fun you want to have because first semester, like August, my interviews with Jan 6th for BCG and Jan 4th for Bain. And then I had interviews with other firms lined up after that. I remember like from September to like Jan, just being about consulting till I got my offer. So I think your first semester while you're settling in, you have an additional stress of performing and get like nailing your interviews. And that's even much sooner for like investment banking because I think your interviews are like late November or early December. So I think your stress is magnified within the first semester when you come to business school and you will find enough resources to be able to perform. So I don't think you need to like stress right now. I always tell like incoming prospective students at Yale, we as a second year case team leader, I want people in my case team to like get MBA offers. So I will make sure that you guys like work hard and stay consistent. So you don't need to stress now. Take some time off work before you start business school and like relax and have a good time with your friends and family because anyways, it's going to be super stressful starting August.
Right. If you could go back in time, Nikita, is there anything you would do differently through your internship recruiting process?
I don't think I would do anything differently. I think one thing that I would probably do again is that just have more conversations about the office that I want to pick because I think as international students, you really don't understand that different cities have different standards of living and different kind of people who are attracted to those cities. So where do you see yourself in all the cities that MBB have offices in and which is a good fit? I think internationals don't spend enough time moving and getting to understand and learn that. And I think that's definitely really important. I was lucky that I figured out DC would be a good fit for me because of a lot of its similarities to Delhi as a city. And I felt like I would fit in more easily in DC. But a lot of my friends, like until November, till your applications are literally weren't able to figure out what city would be best suited to them.
Okay, understood. And the best way is through conversations to
Yeah.
that makes sense. And Nikita, is there anything else about SOM that you would like to share?
No, I think I don't have anything else to add. It's definitely a great program, but having said that, so are most MBA programs. So I do want to reaffirm to people that coming out of any MBA programs, your outcomes can almost always be the same. Like you can go to a consulting firm or you can go to the IB firm, but you should over-index a little bit on the people and the culture that the school has. That is definitely something we don't think about, whether we would fit into that culture or even the city or have good relations with those people. I think that's definitely important.
Helpful. Finally, Nikita, any final advice or pearls of wisdom for prospective applicants or incoming MBA students?
Just persevere because I think there'll be a lot of obstacles while you apply and then when you attend business school, but you shouldn't let anything hold you down. Just go apply to all your dream schools and then apply to all your dream firms. Don't underestimate.
That's really nice advice. And perseverance is something that so many people have to practice. I think people will really be encouraged by your words. Thank you, Nikita. Really appreciate your time. That too during your break, right before your internship starts. Thank you so very much for your time.